Hey guys, it's Shannon here again, and today I'm going to do a edit on a newborn for you guys. I know a lot of people ask for it. So I guess before we even get started, for full disclosure here, this is one of my earlier photos from years ago. So there's so much going on with it that is just not correct in the slightest. Obviously I do things a little bit different these days, but I wanted to show you this, but also I wanted to show you that we all kind of start from somewhere, and I know a lot of you are still working out of rooms in your homes, or just basically working with whatever you have with available natural light coming through a window, and you're just making it work. And I mean, kudos to you, that's fantastic. That's where I started, so I wanted to give you a little taste of my reality and where I kind of came from, but also start with an image that is less than perfect so that you guys can learn the most and how you can adjust your images until you kind of get the setups that you want, or the skills that you need to get it right straight out of camera. So let's go ahead and get started. This little guy came to me, oh gosh, like I said, it was a couple of years ago, and he's got pretty great skin for the most part, but you can see that we need to do some touch-ups on little baby acne and you know, different things. So clearly this image is quite yellow, so let's go ahead and get started. And the way I usually work is I always start in Lightroom. So because it's a little bit yellow, I'm going to start with my temperature and tint over here, and we're just going to kind of work down these panels to the right of your screen, and until we get kind of a good base image that I can bring into Photoshop. So like I said, because he's a little bit yellow, I'm going to take a little bit of, I'm going to bring it down just a little bit and slide it to the blues, and then it kind of adds almost like a green tinge to it, so I'm going to bring my tints over to the magentas. We're getting better there. I'm going to bring down the exposure just a little bit because I feel like I'm losing a lot in the, maybe not too much, just a teeny tiny. But I am going to bring down those highlights. They look like a little bit too much to me. And so when I'm looking at the highlights, I'm usually looking at like the bridge of the nose, like his leg just looks really, really white, that sort of a thing. Oh, and yes, if you're wondering, this is a pee stain. So what I did is I just shifted the blanket back a little bit more so that he was dry, and then because I knew that this is a very easy fix and I can take care of that later. So anything to get those sleeping babies to stay where they're at, right? So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up my blacks, and what I feel like when you bring up the blacks is it feels like it is adding a little bit more of a creamy tone to the skin. And I might actually bring down those whites just a little bit, just because the highlights have a lot of white in them. And up the shadows. And then I'm going to come down here, and I think I'm going to take, so I'm in my sliders for the color, and so in the red channel, I'm going to up the luminance. So you have these little panels here, so the hue, saturation, and the luminance. And I'm going to up the luminance and the reds, and you're going to see a lot of the blotchiness in the skin kind of go away, but you're going to have to be careful with that because you can also make them look quite washed out and almost like grayish if you take too much red out of it. And then I'm going to go into my hues, and I'm going to add a little bit of orange into my yellows just so he doesn't look green. And I think in those blues, I'm going to deepen the blue just a touch. So we're looking pretty good there. I am going to sharpen it. I almost sharpen almost every image. So I sharpen the amount and I sharpen in the details. And then what I like to do is I don't want sharpening all over the whole image because obviously I want the background blurred and the foreground a little bit and different things. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this little masking slider. And if you push Alt or Option, you can slide that over and you can actually see where the sharpness is affecting. So in this case, I'm going to put it about right there. So mostly in the details of the fabric, his lashes, lips, that sort of a thing. And then I'm going to up my luminance just a little bit to take out the noise, just enough to kind of take that little edge off and make the skin nice and smooth, but not so much that they look like a mannequin. So that looks pretty good for starters for me. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come over here and I'm going to edit in Photoshop. And we'll give that a minute. And there we go. Good. Perfect. So let's go ahead and start from there. So what I want to do actually is I'm going to start by cleaning this up quite a bit. So actually, let's see here. Let's start with our levels. So what I like to do is I work in my adjustment levels quite a bit because I can brush on and off everything kind of as I go. So I'm going to start with my levels adjustment layer. So it's like these little peaks here. So I press that, and you'll see your levels pop up right here, but also your properties up here. And what I like to do when I'm looking at my levels is I make sure that my peaks, these little triangles down here, touch the peaks of the mountains. So if you go this far, obviously it's going to be, it ups those whites quite a lot and you're blowing out a lot of details. But if you stay right there at the peak of the mountain, then you know that the details are still in your whites. Okay? And same thing with the blacks. I don't add a lot of blacks to my newborns because obviously it can be kind of gross and sickly looking. So I usually keep my blacks where they are. Sometimes I play with my sliders in the middle, my gray tones, but in this case I'm probably just going to leave them right where they were. And you can kind of see the difference in that. So it just gives us a nice solid start to our image. Okay. And I am a flattener, so I always flatten my images. A lot of people will tell you not to do it, and that's totally fine. You can find your own way to whatever works for you, really. So, okay, so what I'm going to do next is I want to kind of clean up these areas back here and give us a good starting point. So I might try a couple of different things. I edited this image years ago, but I haven't done it recently, so I think I'll have a different approach to it. So you guys get to see me problem solve as we work through this. So what I'm going to do is I think I want to, this is bothering me, this little drop off right here. I want it to be nice and smooth. So what I think I might do is I might actually flip this image and copy this nice smooth blanket into this area if it'll work. So let's see what we can do. So I'm going to duplicate that layer and I'm going to press OK. Then I'm going to come up here, I'm going to go to Edit, Transform, and I'm going to flip it horizontal. So what that does is you can kind of see it over here, the baby's facing two different ways, and this top layer is obviously this way. So I'm going to change the opacity just so I can kind of see where this layer is sitting in reference to where his little bum is, and make sure that we got the fabric where I want it. So here we go. Looks pretty good. Let's scoot it over. So what I'm looking at is the top of his little hat meets the edge of his bum, and that way what I'm seeing is I'm not going to get that weird little bit of his hat poking out from behind him. So that looks pretty good to me. So I'm going to press, I'm going to bring my opacity up, and then I'm going to add a masking layer to that. Close all these. And then I'm going to push Command or Control I, and that inverts it. So we're kind of back to where we were. But then what I can do is I can go in and I can brush on that texture back there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a quick select tool, and I'm going to go to my base layer. And so now all we're seeing is the base layer that we worked with, and everything else is invisible. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select this little baby, his little bum there and his little feet. And his back, there we go. And so what this does is it just has that selection made. And so what I'm going to do is so when I go to brush on that background or reveal that background to the back, it's not going to affect this little part of this little guy. So let me see here. So what I'm going to do, so right now it's just his little bum and his feet and everything are selected. So I'm going to come up here to select, and I'm going to inverse it. So what it does, you can see now the little our little marching ants are around the edge of the image itself. And so essentially what we did is now everything is selected except for his little bum and feet. So then I'm going to come up here to that background layer that we just got, that duplicate layer, and I'm going to be on my masking box here. And then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to grab a big white brush. And I'm going to up the opacity quite a bit. Let's bring it down just a little. And then I'm just going to color on that backdrop. And don't worry about that edge right now because we can take care of that here in just a second. So now you can see, like, when I go and I'm masking on all of that, you know, that blanket, it's not affecting his little feet. Pea stain gone. And like I said, we can take care of all that. I'm gonna back up a little bit. I would rather work with a pea stain and the fade. And we'll do this guy. And select, deselect, and we're gonna kind of see where we're at here. Okay, so obviously we have some weird things happening right here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to come in with a soft black brush. Let's change the opacity, we'll bring it down. And I'm gonna bring back some of that detail that was there before and kind of brush that off so that we don't have any weird lines or anything like that. So it doesn't look like a little sticker cut out. So that's looking pretty good to me. So now you can kind of see, so we have the drop off of the blanket and now everything looks smooth. So like I said, I'm not really worried about these little edges because I'm gonna go in and I'm gonna fix that a little bit. So let's do this. I'm gonna actually brush off this edge a little bit more. I'm going to do layer and flatten layer. Okay. So a real quick way to kind of fix that little edge that we got going on there. So I'm going to come over here to this little square marquee and I'm just going to select it like that. And I'm going to push Command T or Control T and then I'm just going to drag that over. Just a little. And just so we have some bigger space to work with. So I'm not really liking this, so I'm going to pull it over a little bit more and get some nice stretch in the fabric. Deselect. Good. And I know it still looks funky, but we'll take care of that as well. So then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to do, let's see here, let's do a couple things. So, I don't know what it is. Let's do this. So I'm going to start by, I'm going to kind of take care of that spot right there. And let's see if our patch tool will take it. So, and I was just telling somebody this weekend, so that what I'm teaching you here is not necessarily how to do things exactly how I would do them. I'm more so trying to teach you the tools so that you can kind of apply that to what you guys do. So you're going to see me kind of like solve problems and kind of work through everything kind of as I'm going, because there's so many different ways to you know, skin a cat, so to speak. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this. Sometimes I like to use the patch tool. You could probably use the clone tool. You could create like a whole other backdrop if you wanted to, all sorts of things. But in this case, let's go ahead and give the patch tool a try. And we'll see what that does for us. So all I did was kind of selected that area and I dragged it to an area where I wanted the texture to be. So you can see that actually worked fantastic. So I'm really happy with that. Now what I think we're going to do is we're going to, so obviously I want everything to look a little bit smoother with the blanket. You want it to look like this nice little fade, especially when you're working with newborns. Everybody has like that nice clean background. And of course, you know, I was just new and starting and I didn't know all the tips and tricks, and so obviously I had to do a little bit more work in Photoshop, so let's kind of walk through that. So what I'm going to do here to kind of remedy that is I'm going to start with a new layer. So layer, new layer, I'm going to press OK. Okay, so now that we have our new layer, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here and I'm going to pick that color again here, make sure we got the one that we want. Just something nice, soft, not too dark, not too light, somewhere in there works for me. And I'm going to press OK. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here to my gradient tool, and I'm going to make sure that I'm on this little gradient box, so the black to the white, just kind of flowing from one side to the other. I mean, you could do the orb, you could do a star, but obviously we want the transition in the backdrop, so none of those will work for us. So we're going to come in here, and you also want to make sure that you're transitioning. So you have the color that we just picked, and it transitions to this weird green, which you don't want. So you want to pick the color that transitions to a transparency. And that's what these little check boxes mean, this little checkered board kind of pattern. So the checkerboard equals the transparency. So then what I'm going to do is, now that I'm on that one layer, I'm going to start by, I'm going to drag from the top of the image towards the baby. And you'll start to see like this nice smooth transitioning pattern kind of come in a little bit. And you can do that from all over the image. So I'm going to pick another color down here, and I'm going to kind of drag it to the side. Good. And then maybe another little one over here. Because obviously you don't want, you know, if the lighting is different or is coming from one way or another, it's not all going to be one big color. So you don't want it to look like they're just floating in the air. So that's why I'm using kind of different colors to make sure that everything kind of blends the way it should, and it's not like this weird floating baby on a random all white backdrop. So here we go. So that's looking pretty good. I might do this one more time. Maybe not that one, maybe a little bit more like this. So you can kind of play with your angles a little bit so you kind of get that blend that you want. There we go. That's looking a little bit better for me. Good. So now what I'm going to do, so obviously it kind of like overlaps on the baby just a little bit. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a masking layer, and that's going to be this little square box with the dot in it. And you can see that it creates a masking box on there as well. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna do kind of what we did before, and we're gonna create a selection on just the baby. So you want to make sure you're on that background layer again, and we're gonna use our quick select tool, and I'm gonna come in and I'm gonna select the baby. And then I'm going to do a refine edge tool. So if you're working in Creative Cloud, you're going to have different, it's going to come up a little bit differently when you push the refine edge tool. You're going to have like sliders over here to create the feathering. Because I'm in an older version of Photoshop right now, I just need to bite the bullet and do the monthly thing, but I hate monthly payments. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to outline that edge of the baby. And then it's going to feather that edge so that when I go and I remove that, all that gradient and everything that we just did, it's not going to look like this crispy edge. It's going to look feathered and blended really nicely. All right, and then I'll press OK. Good. And then I'm going to come up here to that gradient that we created, and I'm going to use a black brush. I'm going to use a pretty heavy opacity because I want it to take all of that off of the baby. So you can kind of see it being removed. And you can see right there, we probably need to touch that up just a little bit. So I'll push select, deselect. And I'm just going to softly do it right there. Make sure it's off on other areas of the baby. Okay, and we're doing pretty good. So I'm going to do a quick back and forth for you. Look at the difference. It's almost embarrassing. But, you know, like I said, we all start somewhere. So real quick before I move forward, what I'm going to do is I want to kind of soften this area down here with my with the color gradient. So I'm going to use a big black brush, and I'm going to bring down the opacity just a touch, so maybe around 30%, 20% or so. And I'm just going to softly brush that off, revealing some of the texture and pattern that's in that fabric. Maybe a little less right here, because that's where we have that little imperfection there. And then just like that. That way we can still see the blanket, because you want it to all be nice and believable. Okay, good. So layer, and I'm going to flatten that image. So now that we have a really good base to work with, we can start perfecting the skin and whatnot. So what I'm going to do for this little guy is, you can kind of see he has some little baby acne and different things happening. So we're going to go ahead and take care of that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here to, you can see the patch tool, but what I want is the spot healing brush. And this is a fantastic tool for little areas like this. So like little baby acne, you know, big people acne, little hairs that kind of cut through the face, and you literally just kind of tap it on those areas. And Photoshop is pretty smart, and it kind of picks up on the texture that's around it, and it kind of just duplicates those healthier areas of the skin and takes care of those little dots. So little dry skin patches here. Good. Little baby eye boogers, stuff like that. Get rid of those. Dry patch. I know some people like to leave the dry patches of skin. To me, it just kind of depends on the image. I mean, that's part of being a newborn. That's not really a flaw in their skin, I don't think. I think it's just part of being a newborn. Okay. Just for an example, I guess, with hairs, you could do this like if you have a child or somebody that has like a hair kind of cutting through their face, and you can see how smart this little tool is. There you go. And then I'll do this guy. There you go. So anything that's kind of distracting. And then let's do this little thing on his foot. That's probably from his little shots. Here we go. And we'll zoom out. It's looking pretty good. So now I want to go ahead and I'm going to smooth his skin quite a bit. He really doesn't have bad skin by any means, but I just want to remove some of a little bit of the texture and make it look like real nice, creamy, beautiful baby skin. So the way I'm going to do it for this image, like I said before, there's so many different ways that you can smooth skin and whatnot. And sometimes I use multiple techniques on the skin on one subject. So let's see where we go with this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this layer. I'm going to press OK. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here to this blending mode, and I'm going to change this layer that I just created. I'm going to change its blending mode to vivid light. And it's going to create this funky looking image. And then I'm going to push Command or Control I, and then it's even weirder. And so we're going to come up here to Filter, Other, High Pass. Okay, and then I'm going to bump this radius up to around 24 or so. Okay, and then we're going to press OK. And then we're going to come up here again to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur. And I'm going to slide that until I see the textures of the skin is blurred just the way I want it to be. So maybe a little less. That looks pretty good to me. I'm going to press OK. So obviously this is not working for the whole image, so I'm going to go ahead and press the masking layer box, and it pops up right there, right next to it. I'm going to push Command or Control I to invert it so that we can just come over here, grab a brush, make sure it's a white brush. I'm going to bring it down so it's nice and small. And then I'm going to up the opacity to around 80%, and then I'm going to brush that adjustment on just the baby's skin. Kind of try to avoid the edges of the skin because it can have, this technique has some like weird haloing effects to it sometimes. So I'm mostly just staying right inside of like where the skin is, avoiding the edges. Okay, so let's go do a little bit over here on the lips. My brush a little bit bigger. You can do the eyelids a little bit, but don't do it too much. You can do the bottoms of the feet, but I really wouldn't do that too much either because you want to maintain that texture that's there, those cute little wrinkles. Okay, so I'm going to show you kind of the before and after. So you can see. It doesn't look like much when you're doing it at the time, but once you get done, it definitely makes a huge difference. Okay. Fantastic. So looking good. So layer, flatten image. Okay, so overall the image is looking a little bit flat. I wish there was more color to it, that sort of a thing. His skin looks a little bit dull, so I'm going to brighten up his skin quite a bit. I like color. I'm sure you guys have probably noticed by now. So I like my skin tones to be true and vibrant and warm and all that fun stuff. So this is kind of how I like to do that. So I'm going to come over here to my selective color box. And I'm going to touch that and you'll see this little thing pop up, but you'll also see your properties pop up as well. So I'm going to be working in, so sometimes like you see like these highlights and stuff, that has a lot of white in it. So what I like to do to add kind of like a pinky or more of a tan look to anybody's skin is I work in the white channel. So in that white channel, I'm going to take out the cyan. I'm going to up the yellow. I'm going to up the magenta. I might actually add a little bit of black to it just to kind of bring down those highlights a little bit. Okay, so you can kind of see where we're at with things. Looking good. And then I'm actually going to go into my yellows. I'm going to take the cyan out of the yellows. Not too much because you don't want them to look jaundicy. I might add a little bit of magenta to them. And then I'm going to go into my red channels as well. And I'm going to take the cyan out. I might add a little bit of yellow so they don't look sunburned. And that looks really good, but it's kind of made the whole image a little bit pink. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to push Command or Control I, and I'm going to invert that so we can't see it or make it invisible. And I'm going to come in with the white brush. I'm at 80% opacity, and I'm going to brush that on the skin. Those feet. That's looking pretty good. We have a pink baby. So you can kind of see the difference there. Good. Layer, flatten image. So this, the backdrop, I want to do something with it. I'm not sure what though. It looks a little too, it looks grayish to me or kind of dingy, almost like, I don't know, I don't love the color. So I want to shift it just a little bit. So I'm going to, do we want to go more gray? Let's go more neutral beige maybe. Okay, so let's do it again. So let's do your selected color. And I'm coming to my yellows. I'm going to take a little bit of cyan out of the yellow. I might deepen it a little bit. I'm going to add a touch of magenta. A little bit less cyan in the yellow. Let's see where that puts us. Oh yeah, that's much better. Much better. So then I put all that yellow and whatnot onto the baby. So instead of inverting it and painting it on, in this case, I'm going to leave it as is so you can kind of see the whole adjustment. And I'm just going to brush it off of the baby and also that cute little blue outfit. Yeah. So now like that backdrop looks more of like a neutral. It doesn't look so like this gray, greeny, weird color. So again, when I was still pretty new at this, and I just was grabbing any fabric I could basically when it came to working with newborns. Good. So you can kind of see. It's a slight difference, but it warms it up just enough so it doesn't look like a sickly color. So layer, flatten image. Okay. And so I remember like thinking when I was doing newborns and how people got babies to like sit up. Well, not necessarily sit up, but how they got them at these like angles. And then I remember then I learned that you just had to tilt your camera when you were shooting it, and it kind of put them where you wanted them to be. So a lot of times I had them in this little divot, and then I would shift the adjustment of my camera angle. And so sometimes like you can kind of do something like this, and then you get them at that slant without having to try and pop the baby upward. So that's kind of a fun little thing you can do. But I like it out a little bit better, get the baby a little bit more room. So we won't crop it in this case, but that's kind of a fun little trick. So now what I want to do is I want to make that blue more of a true blue. To me, like there are like little bits of purpley in that thread, but I don't really want it to be purple. I want it to be more of a true blue. So I'm actually going to come over here and we're going to grab, again, the selective color tool. And what's nice is when you're working with the selective color, if you know how to work with a selective color, you could change anything. You can change like the coloring of the skin, and you notice that I'm kind of working in parts. So we did the skin, we did the backdrop, and now I'm going to do the little outfit that he's wearing. So you can treat the whole image in parts, and to me that seems to kind of work best with how I process things. So it might be good to do it for you as well. So in the blues, so what I'm going to do, I guess, let's do this. Let's add a little bit of cyan to the yellows. Take the cyan out. And then I'm going to go into the blues, and I'm going to take out the yellows and add a little bit of cyan. Let's go into the neutrals, add a little bit of cyan, take out the yellow, and you can see it's getting kind of vibrant. So let's deepen that up down just a little bit. It looks pretty good. So again, we're just doing this to the overall outfit for the little baby. So the whole image looks blue, it's shifted blue, and that's, so we gotta have to invert that. So Command or Control I to invert it. And then I'm gonna come in with a white brush, small white brush, and I'm just gonna brush that on the outfit. You can see how it kind of is making it pop a lot more. Let's make that brush smaller. And there we go. It's blue as blue. Layer, flatten image. And then I might do a slight sharpening just on kind of his little face features there. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to duplicate the layer. I'm going to press OK. I'm going to come up here to Filter, Other, High Pass. And I'm going to slide this radius down to about 4 or 5, somewhere in there. I'm going to press OK. And I'm going to come over here, I'm going to change the blending mode to Soft Light. And again, we don't want to apply this to the whole image, so I'm going to add a masking layer. And push Command or Control I to invert it. And then I'm going to use a white brush, and I'm going to brush it like on his little lashes, his little cute little baby lips, the nostrils. And then sometimes I like to do it around the hairline too. I do layer, flatten image. So we're looking pretty good there. One other thing I like to do before I kind of wrap up a shot is I'll go back and I'll check my layer levels again. So sometimes when we're doing all this stuff and we're shifting things and changing things, it can kind of change the levels a little bit, so an image can start to look dingy all over again. So I'm going to bring this levels up just a little bit, and you can see that that kind of brightened up the image, just that little slight little bit. Okay, layer, flatten image, let me back up, make sure that we're good. I want to lighten it up a little bit. This seem to, sometimes when I back up and I zoom out so much, I can see more of my flaws. And so what I want to do is I kind of want to take off that hard edge of like where the light is ending. So I'm going to create a new layer, new layer. I'm going to press OK. And then I think I'm going to pick a slightly lighter color. I'm going to go back into my gradient, and then I'm going to come over here to my color picker. So pick this little box and you'll see this pop up, but if you push Alt and you pick a softer shade, so maybe somewhere, maybe in there. We'll see how that goes. And then I'm going to drag it from the top towards the baby. And then I'm going to pick a lighter shade from here. I'm going to bring down the opacity just so it doesn't look funky. I'm going to do it again up here. I'm going to change the opacity of the actual gradient that I'm doing. I'm going to start from here and see what we got. And then I'm going to come over here, I'm going to add a masking layer to it, and I'm going to grab a black brush, and I'm going to brush that off the baby. Good. That much better. So I was just seeing, like, I mean, you can see it. It's like this dark layer that kind of like halos around it, kind of scoops around, and I don't really like that transition. It doesn't really look good. So that looks much better to me. Make sure it's all off the baby. And I'll tap around it just to kind of make it a little bit more blended. There we go. Layer, flatten image. And then I think that we are all set. I actually really like the, I like how it turned out. I like the coloring. I know everybody does things a little bit differently, and that's totally okay, but at least you've learned some new tools to kind of help you create some of your newborn images, especially when they start off like mine is, you know, less than perfect. Okay, so I think that that is looking pretty good. I just want to kind of show you the before and after. So here we go with the before and the after, the before and the after. And yeah, so there you have it. So here, this is a, you know, a good example of how to get from an image that is very much less than perfect to a really nice piece of art for your clients. So anyways, thanks again for watching, guys. I hope you learned so much and learned some new tools on how you can use this stuff in your own images. Please let us know if you have any questions or if you have any suggestions on what you would like to see next. Have a good day, guys.